Mr. DeWalt.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. I want to thank you for allowing me to testify to you today. I'd like to make a couple quick points. The reason that citizens in increasing numbers, and this exact same process is actually happening at this very same time in Washington State also. The reason that citizens have come to their state legislatures to ask you to do something which is normally not in the job description of a state legislature is that we, the citizens, feel that we're in extraordinary times. We feel that in this particular instance, we are witnessing a breakdown of law and order in our government, in our constitutional structure. We're seeing a breakdown in the actual constitutional structure of our government. We understand from the Constitution that there's a very clear delineation of powers. There's the executive branch, legislative branch, and judicial branch. And we have seen through this particular president that that normal balance of powers has been disregarded. With respect to the signing statements, I would just like to, it's true signing statements have been added to bills ever since the time of Madison. However, until the time of George W. Bush, all signing statements simply said, I'm signing this bill and it's a law. However, I have some constitutional questions about paragraph such and such, or I think that this is constitutionally questionable, but it was signed. It was signed into law. George Bush has been the first president who has said, I'm going to sign this into law, and then on my signing statement, I'm going to say that I am not bound to obey this law. That has never been done in the history of our country before. We have never had a president who has officially signed a piece of paper saying, I'm above the law. And that is what we are facing today. So, as a natural recourse, citizens take action. I wrote a town meeting resolution. It was passed. The next year was passed. About 40 towns have passed it. 20 towns in Massachusetts have passed it. And so we go to our congressman, and we say, Congressman, you are the person with the power to impeach. You are the person to come to Congress and make this case for us, the people. And our congressman, and going back to the point you made about what you know about Gerald Ford saying, impeachment is an impeachable offense is whatever Congress decides is an impeachable offense. This particular Congress, for reasons which frankly are beyond any of our understanding, has decided that issues such as the signing statement, the fact that we have now decided to make torture, and this is stated policy. Well, the president has not said he's in favor of torture, but his administration says they do believe that waterboarding is an appropriate thing. The Army Code of Justice calls waterboarding torture. The Spanish Inquisition called waterboarding torture. So we now have a president which says we want a waterboard, which you could very sensibly argue is against the Fourth Amendment, Justice Scalia notwithstanding. So we have that. We have a president who has issued signing statements. We have a president who told us supposed facts about a war that he wanted us to enter. And those facts turned out to be not true, and in fact, the overwhelming evidence points to the fact that perhaps the president was well aware of this at the time. And this is a war which has cost upwards of $1 trillion now, 4,000 American lives, perhaps as many as 1 million Iraqi lives. So these are egregious breaches of the Constitution and breaches of law. And with respect to answering your questions, Representative Baldessaro, about the FISA Act, Mr. Bush has actually, in public, in front of the cameras, said, yes, I signed orders for warrantless wiretaps, and I will do it again, and I expect Congress to change the law to make it okay. So you can argue that that's a good idea or a bad idea, but you can't argue the fact that the president has admitted that he has broken the FISA law. So be that as it may. And also you could extend what he has done with respect to FISA into the Constitution and unreasonable search and seizure, which is certainly wiretapping would be unreasonable search. So these are issues which we've taken to our congressmen, and our congressmen, sadly, have decided that through some kind of political calculation, they think they're going to be better off if they don't hold the president accountable to the Constitution and to the rule of law. We disagree with this assessment. We think that they're crazy. But nonetheless, they've made that upon themselves. And that brings to a fine point that impeachment is indeed a political act. And it was made that specifically. Our founder said, we need to put a clause into place to prevent another king from appearing. And we don't have to write out 1,000 rules and regulations that they have to break in order to be impeached. We expect the people who follow us to understand when the Constitution and the country is put at peril by the actions of our president. And when that happens, we expect them to act. What we are saying to you is millions, literally, millions of people across this country have recognized the actions of the Bush administration under Mr. Bush and Mr. Cheney, the actions of the Attorney General's office, the refusal of administration appointees to respond to Congress. Congress tries to have some of these hearings. They try to investigate some of these things, and they've been stonewalled. They've been refused witnesses. They've been refused testimony by witnesses. An impeachment hearing cannot be stopped by the president. If Congress chose to have an impeachment hearing, they could actually investigate these charges. The president would not be able to stop the investigation. And they could find out, maybe they would find out, that indeed it's all a bunch of hot air and shouldn't happen. But what has happened now is Congress has refused to investigate. The normal sort of ways that they might have hearings have been stonewalled by the president's actions. So as citizens, we are looking around and we're saying we are living in a lawless state. We're living in a country that right now today is operating outside of the Constitution. We have an executive branch which no longer recognizes the authority of the legislative branch to make the law. We have an executive branch that no longer recognizes its own duty to be held to the law. And we have a legislative branch that does not believe that their oath to protect and defend the Constitution extends to the extent of actually holding the president accountable for not obeying the law and for not living up to the Constitution. Thomas Jefferson had great mistrust for regal law, for rulers. And it was in the Jefferson Manual that Ms. Representative Hall has turned to for guidance in how we, the people, can get to the representatives who are the closest to us. The House of Representatives in any given state are those representatives closest to us as people. You folks are the ones who, the smallest number of us are represented by you. We can call you on the phone. You're the most connected to our government that we have. Jefferson recognized that only in the case of impeachment, only in the case of malfeasance by the executive branch, would there possibly be a time that the state legislatures, those bodies closest to the people themselves, could take an action to impeach a leader. And in the Jefferson parliamentary rules, it's not in the Constitution, it's in the parliamentary rules, he states how if a legislature votes impeachment resolutions, and they do it in such a way, which Representative Hall has done, and they send it down to Congress, it has to be considered by Congress. Now, Congress has the option, they can put it on the floor just like they did Representative Kucinich's bill, and they can decide to table it. No, they can do what they want. But Jefferson thought it important enough to hold runaway executives in check that he gave that power to state legislatures in order to voice the will of the people when their normal conduits have been shut down. And that's what we face right now. In the state of Vermont, 63 or something % of the people believe that there should be impeachment investigations. Yet, we have a famously liberal, famously progressive Democratic contingent which refuses to take any action on that state. We are not being represented in the state of Vermont by our own legislators, by our own representatives. Therefore, we went to our state representatives and we asked them to speak for us, and they sent the word down to Washington. We are simply asking New Hampshire to take the same question into consideration, to decide if it's incumbent upon you to act on behalf of the citizens when we clearly see that our government is failing to live up to its constitutional structure. So this is, as much as Mr. Bush and Mr. Cheney are the folks behind this egregious behavior, this is not about Mr. Bush or Mr. Cheney. I think Bill Clinton should have been impeached for taking bribe money from China and selling them arms. This is not a partisan issue. And if the impeachment trial started on the day before Mr. Bush's final day in office, that would not matter. Because this is a trial to save the presidency and the democracy and the Constitution. It's not a trial to get back at Mr. Bush and Mr. Cheney for lying to us. And I think that is the most important thing to take. And the fact that we are here today in Concord asking you, who are normally thinking about other issues, to talk about the impeachment and send a resolution calling for impeachment hearings to begin is an indication of how desperate we feel the country's situation has sunk into and how we feel compelled as patriotic citizens to do whatever we possibly can to make this point with those of you who are in power.